So what did we know and what did we not understand? Well, back at the end of 2011, there were some things we didn't know about the self-styled Islamic State. And by we, I mean the analysts and specialists who had been studying the group for years. We didn't know whether the group would focus more on attacking America. So, for example, a group strategist even mentioned the idea of encouraging attacks on America around 2008. We didn't know whether they would be eclipsed by other groups, such as Ansar al-Islam or Jaish Rijal al-Tariqa al-Naqshbandiyya. And we didn't know if they would shift to terrorism and stay with terrorism away from insurgency and away from establishing an Islamic State. And we didn't know whether they would become less ideological. Some analysts thought that because of their defeat, they would become more pragmatic. So that's really most of what we didn't understand. I'll get to the rest at the end. But we did know in 2011 that we weren't finished with them. They still exercised influence over the local population in Mosul. Their security and media operations there were near full capacity. They were fully capable of conducting lethal attacks. And we knew that Sunni exclusion in Iraq, real or perceived, could create space for their renewed activities. Today, I'll talk about what the analytic community knew about the Islamic State before 2012. I based this talk on sources published and made available before 2012. So this is what anybody could have known. I'll concentrate on their financing. I'm an economist, so I have to do that, and their organization. I'll discuss some aspects of how they gained and maintained control of an area and their relationship with air power. And then what this means at the end for countering them. I'll add a small touch of that. But first, I say that there are people who have been studying the Islamic State, which seems new, for years. Well, for many, they burst into the public awareness in June 2014 with their conquest of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, as this Meet ISIS headline from the New York Times says. They were then called the Islamic State of Iraq and al-Sham, ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL. They seem to come out of nowhere. But the Islamic State of today is the direct descendant of a group that the United States, Iraq, and our coalition partners had once fought as al-Qaeda in Iraq, and then as the Islamic State of Iraq. It operates today with the same basic structure, philosophy, and goals. In the worst days of our fight in Iraq, our being the United States, one particularly violent terrorist stood out, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, also called the Sheikh of the Slaughterers. It was in the 1990s in Jordan that Zarqawi started the group that would become the Islamic State. His operation eventually moved to Iraq, and in 2004, he aligned his group with al-Qaeda. A coalition operation killed him in 2006, but two new leaders replaced him. Later that year, in 2006, the organization declared itself the Islamic State of Iraq, or ISI, with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as its emir and Abu Ayyub al-Masri, or Abu Hamza al-Muhajir, as the Minister of War. The group came under severe military pressure from late 2006, and a US-led operation killed both leaders in 2010. But once again, another leader emerged, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, a veteran not only of ISI, but also of one of the prisons maintained by US forces in Iraq during the war. As the civil war in Syria escalated in 2011, Baghdadi established a new group there without claiming any affiliation. Infighting between the Iraqi wing and the Syrian wing, Jabhat al-Nusra, developed, and in 2013, Baghdadi established an overt presence in Syria, changed his group's name to ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and in early 2014, al-Qaeda formally disavowed all connections with ISIS. Following the conquest of Mosul in June, Baghdadi declared his group the Islamic State and declared himself the Caliph of all Islam. I want to highlight several things from the history of the organization. First, even from its earliest days, its objective was the declaration of an Islamic state organized under Sharia. In March 2005, the group voiced the objective of reestablishing the rightly guided caliphate. Whoops. In 2008, the second anniversary of the founding of ISI, the group's top officials compared their state to that of Muhammad in Medina, justified their looting and their coercion in this context, and said that ISI was the seed of great things to come. They also noted that Iraq would be the stepping stone for Jerusalem. They took this vision seriously. After the founding of the state, ISI, they released a document explaining the state to the people and outlining the state's responsibilities, which mainly included running judicial processes, resolving disputes, collecting required charity, the zakat, freeing prisoners, and supporting families of members who had been killed. Second, ISI viewed violent jihad as an ethical duty. This violence had a special focus on killing Shia. Zarqawi is well known as masterminding the attack on the Shia al-Askari shrine in Samarra in February 2006, which sparked enormous sectarian violence. But on the second anniversary of the state, in 2008, Abu Umar al-Baghdadi reiterated that jihad is necessary and that killing one apostate, their term for the Shia, was worth more than killing 100 crusaders, their term for US forces. Third, when they were under severe pressure and facing military defeat, they retreated to Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, and the desert area Al Jazeera between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So they're defeated, but let's consider the pattern of security incidents from January 2007 to January 2008 in 4 provinces, even while they're under pressure. And we're including Nineveh, which is where Mosul is. Security incidents throughout ISI's area of activity were declining, except in one place, in Nineveh province, where they were retreating. By February 2008, a month after that, the number of incidents in Nineveh had risen to 747. Mosul had been a consistent base for the Takfiri and Salafi jihadi resistance that constituted ISI. Nineveh was a key logistics center for foreign fighters entering Iraq to fight with ISI. It was ethnically and religiously divided, constraining the type of awakening that rose up elsewhere in Iraq to beat back ISI. Furthermore, there had been few government reconciliation initiatives there, and many residents held a deep distrust of the central government, dominated by the Shia. Finally, it had been a Ba'athist stronghold, and by 2010, the dividing line between ISI and Ba'athist groups had become very thin at best. This stronghold was important to ISI's continued survival and operational tempo. For example, Abu Kaswara, the emir of northern Iraq until October 2008, is widely credited with maintaining the strength of the group while it was under attack elsewhere. Even in early 2009, a US military spokesman noted that for ISI to win, it would have to take Baghdad, but for it to survive, it would have to hold on to Mosul. To fuel this activity, ISI needed money. Where did the money come from? ISI emphasized raising money locally and declined to pursue donations. In 2005 and 2006, for example, only 5% of the group's Anbar revenues came from donors. Anbar in 2005-2006 was the peak of its power. From June to November 2006, donations constituted less than 3% of total revenues. This finding contradicts the persistent misperception that the group was and is funded largely by wealthy Gulf donors. Its main revenue sources included, and this will be very familiar, oil smuggling. In 2006, an estimated 1/3 of the Beji refinery oil was lost to smuggling. And by mid-2007, about 70% of Beji output was being diverted to the black market. In early 2007, it was reported that ISI had earned more than $1 billion from smuggling oil from the Beji refinery. Oil provided revenue a number of different ways. These included tapping pipelines, hijacking or diverting tanker trucks, and even setting up fake gas stations to gain the rights to fuel shipments. Sales of stolen goods. These included cars, a truckload of pajamas, and possibly even construction equipment, generators, and electrical cables. One of their biggest thefts involved stealing 26 real estate ledgers with titles for $90 million worth of property and then reselling it. Extortion. Extortion practices included taking up to 20% of the value of contracts from large businesses in Mosul, including a soft drink plant and cement manufacturers. They also demanded payments from mobile phone companies in return for not destroying their cell towers. That practice alone brought in about $200,000 a month from one company at one point. Other crime-like activities. These included cigarette smuggling, charging $500 per truck to allow passage on roadways, kidnap for ransom, and stealing from Shia. Stealing from Shia, recall, was a fundamental part of the group's activities and in line with its overall religious philosophy. A 2008 statement by Abu Ayyub al-Masri discussed the proper use of booty taken from infidels and apostates. The latter, apostates, the group's term for Shia. One ISI execution report from November 2007 discussed the killing of a Shia from Samarra who worked for the Samarra Emergency Police. Quote, "We have taken a BMW and other things from him. We thank God of all creations." In fact, unlike Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations that rely on foreign donors, ISI deliberately protected its autonomy by raising money locally. When the group was on the defensive in 2007 and 2008, one ISI strategist in a very long document, very interesting document, counseled against raising money from foreign state sponsors since they could end up controlling the group. He identified sector emirs ignoring self-sufficiency as a major flaw in management. The group exhibited sophisticated financial management and reallocated money among different units. From June 2005 to May 2006, almost 21% of Anbar provincial revenues came from money raised by different sectors within the province. Furthermore, the Anbar administrator transferred money to Mosul, the border sections, and Basra. In a 2005 letter to Zarqawi, Zawahiri from Al-Qaeda, this was intercepted and published in 2005, even asked for a transfer of $100,000 from Iraq to the group's headquarters in Pakistan. We don't know if that transfer actually took place. Behind this sophisticated financial operation was a sophisticated organization. ISI was and is same thing throughout its entire history, a bureaucratic, hierarchical organization. Lower level units report to upper level units, and these units are structured similarly. The ISI strategist that I mentioned credited the group's method of organization to what he called the first generation of jihadist leaders in Iraq, the group led by Zarqawi before he swore allegiance, bay'ah, to Al-Qaeda. Specifically, this generation established the group's bureaucracy based on 4 pillars: security, military, administration, and Sharia. Let's take a look at that organization in practice. In Mosul in 2009, ISI had an overall provincial emir, a deputy emir, and then 4 positions that were part of the original plan: security, Sharia, military, and administration, along with a media emir. Although not among the original 4 in the strategy document, media played an important role throughout the life of the group, spreading its message and inspiring people to join, much as today. A year after Zarqawi's death, the ISI's media wing, Furqan Media Productions, had embarked on a major effort called the Prince of the Martyrs Project to memorialize Zarqawi, complete with audio clips of him, endorsements by Abu Omar al-Baghdadi and Abu Ayyub al-Masri, eulogies, and reports for TV satellite stations. Because of the importance of media to the group, there was a major US and coalition targeting campaign throughout 2007, 2008, 2009. A lot of that in 2007, 2008 was focused on the media emirs. Under these top-level emirs for the different sectors in Mosul, there were sector emirs, as shown here under the military emir. Other provinces had similar structures with an overall emir and specialized emirs at the provincial level, and then sector emirs and specialized emirs at the lower levels. The emirs had departments or committees working with them. The committee structure created a bench of personnel knowledgeable in managing a terrorist group that intended to become a state. During the group's weakest days, emirs proliferated. The Euphrates River runs through Anbar, and one sector there had an emir of boats. In fact, this proved to be a problem because elsewhere there were emirs of gas, mortars, booby traps, tents, and kitchens. So one group had an emir of tents. This proliferation of emirs was judged to lead to a lack of respect by members towards the leadership, and that was cleaned up as the group evolved through the later 2000s. Now let's take a look at how the group established control. The basic structure of the organization, security, Sharia, military, administration, media, was essential to its operations. You can see this in understanding how ISI established control over an area. In fact, this gives insight into how it reemerged. The ISI strategist, writing in late 2007 or 2008, laid out a plan for retaking the city of Husayba in Anbar province. First, ISI would rent houses and move experienced members in with their families, begin surveillance, and try to create a network of residents who would host other members. Then, a group of security personnel would move in and conduct an assassination campaign against the heads of apostasy, government officials. After that, there would be shelling of the city, perhaps referring to actual shelling or to bombing campaign, such as through vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. And finally, direct conquest. This was not just theoretical. Time after time, ISI would establish an intelligence and security apparatus, target key opponents, establish extortion and other criminal revenue-raising practices, establish administrative and financial functions, lay the foundations for command and control, recruiting and logistics, establish a Sharia network, building relations with local religious leaders, establish a media and information function, and then establish military cells to conduct attacks. Infiltration and assassination have been key parts of ISI's playbook since the beginning until today. Well before ISIS swept into Mosul in June 2014, their sleeper cells had infiltrated in the city and probably never left. Since I'm at the Fisher Institute, let me talk a bit about ISI and air power. Air power was both an effective tool against ISI and something the group feared. Again, we knew this before 2012. The most obvious use was in killing ISI leaders with airstrikes, such as Zarqawi, killed with precision munitions in Diyala province in June 2006. Precision airstrikes remained an essential part of the battle against ISI. Attacks on ISI from the air, both precision and not, originated from both attack helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. Air was also important in combined arm operations. A successful U.S. operation in December 2007 to clear ISI from parts of Babel province started with airstrikes before the operation using close air support munitions, and then before and during the operation, Army aviation and field artillery destroyed safe houses and supported soldiers on the ground. In June 2007, Operation Command Eagle southwest of Baghdad featured a mix of helicopter-borne air assaults and Humvee-mounted movements targeting a set of houses used by ISI. Air support, drones in this case, was also used to track ISI operatives. And air support was also used to move U.S. personnel to an area to conduct operations against specified targets. The ISI strategist noted that U.S. troops in late 2007 or 2008 were moving with impunity through ISI areas. He cited airdrops, in this context, likely operations by helicopter, along with ambushes and air superiority, all of which were creating fear among ISI members. But there had also been ISI thinking about how to defend against air superiority. In a description of how to conquer an enemy emplacement, the ISI strategist noted that ISI's air defense group should set up under foliage, generally under palm groves, to protect itself as it ambushed enemy air cover. Air power can be considered so important to the fight against ISI that in 2011, as US forces were planning for their final pullout, analysts noted that the Iraqi security forces might not be able to maintain pressure on ISI. At the time, the United States was the primary enabler of Iraqi operations, providing aircraft, intelligence, refined targeting, and medevac. With the pullout, gaps specifically noted were a lack of intelligence support, as well as Iraq's undeveloped aviation capabilities. These included limited transport operations, only 3 attack AC-208 combat caravans that were largely untested, and no high-end tactical flying capabilities for special operations. In spite of the Sunni awakening movement in 2006, the US troop surge in 2007, and a campaign of highly refined US and Iraqi counterterrorism operations that badly damaged ISI, the group was strong enough to persist. By 2009, ISI was regenerating, conducting a series of suicide attacks. In 2010, more people were still being killed in terrorist incidents in Iraq than in Afghanistan or Pakistan, although not all of these were attacks by ISI. This afternoon we'll discuss solutions, but I'd like to lay out some broad ideas connecting what we knew to today. The Islamic State of today is a direct descendant of AQI and ISI, but with the expansive declaration of a global caliphate, a considerably greater scale of territory and personnel, and growth in areas outside of Iraq and Syria, including Libya and even Afghanistan. A successful strategy against the Islamic State will comprise many elements, but the history I've talked about today can inform that. I'll concentrate on 3 factors that I've discussed: finances, organization, control. First, the coalition against the group must degrade the finances of the Islamic State. Today, as before, the Islamic State raises money locally through oil smuggling, sales of stolen goods, local taxes, roadway tolls, sales of archaeological artifacts, and extortion, even taking a cut of the money that the government of Iraq sends its employees within ISIS territories. Local fundraising means halting financial flows will remain a challenge, but there are things the coalition can do. Although oil smuggling still brings in considerable revenue, it's been dealt a blow by the coalition's destruction of oil infrastructure and the recapture of some oil fields. To broaden the fight against such revenues and revenues from antiquities smuggling, the coalition will need to identify the middlemen and end purchasers and either target them or sanction their financial institutions. This will be extremely difficult. Second, any coherent plan against the Islamic State must eliminate its leadership. But the deep bench of personnel means that attacking individual leaders won't destroy the group. Replacements will rise up and the effect will be temporary. So to be successful, the coalition must do more than take out key leaders. It has to eliminate entire layers, the committees of high-level managers, the administrative emir and his administrative committee. Third, ending an overt IS presence in an area does not mean victory. It means the nature of the fight has changed. Even in 2008, the organization was majority Iraqi. These were not a bunch of foreigners in Iraq. With extensive underground support networks, it has consistently followed a strategy of infiltration, assassination, and intimidation. This means that after IS is expelled from a town or an area, the trust of the community must be gained so that intelligence can be collected. An active police or troop presence needs to be established. History shows that ISI could not control urban populations in the face of a strong security presence. Local and regional military forces are now taking the fight directly to ISIS, but these forces certainly will need to be more effective to defeat the group. Even if their effectiveness is increased, though, military action is necessary, although not sufficient, and this echoes exactly what we heard this morning. Even before ISIS reemerged in 2013, analysts in 2010 and 2011 noted that Sunni exclusion from the Iraqi state could create space for extremists, and that political dysfunction would benefit ISI. They noted that conditions were evolving to benefit ISI. Sunni Shia tensions were growing, elements of the Iraqi security forces were becoming more deeply aligned with ethno-sectarian groups rather than giving their primary loyalty to the state. and large-scale releases of detainees were returning dangerous people to society. This gave ISIS the political space to reemerge. And so this is really the last thing that we didn't understand. We knew that their violence had alienated them from the Sunni community. What we didn't know was that with proper space to expand, instead of retreating from their violence, they would really double down and increase their violence even further. So any successful effort now with the group will involve a political accommodation with the Sunnis. There's really no choice. It will be very difficult. And it will also involve some patience, because even as we knew in 2011, the group is remarkably resilient. And we won't know that, and it probably will never be able to be eradicated completely. Thank you.